Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Susan Jones. I'm a first grade teacher up in Massachusetts who likes to take you along for the ride and share some of my favorite first grade activities and resources. As you can see by the title, in today's video, I wanted to talk all about place value. Place value is one of the most important things we are going to teach in first grade. So I just wanted to walk you through kind of 7 main lessons that I end up teaching throughout this unit. And so I want to share a little background about each one, and then I'll actually walk you through the exact slides I use with the activities and worksheets that my students use each and every day. So if you are ready for that, give this video a thumbs up, make sure you are subscribed to my channel, and let's dive right in. Okay, before I dive into the specifics, I wanted to just give you a little context so you understand kind of when we teach this and just some of the lessons we've already taught previously. So for context, it is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, and we are 102 days into school. And the math curriculum our school currently uses is Math in Focus. It's an HMH program. It looks like this right here. I believe it's a Singapore math type of curriculum. And I've used it for the 2 years I've been here. I think the district has used it for 6, 7, something like that years. So the way that they teach it is we start off in first grade reviewing numbers 1 through 10, a very basic review. And then we will go into kind of adding and subtracting within 10. Then we go into numbers 1 through 20, and that is really where we introduce the very first type of place value, where we are talking about those teen numbers as being a 10 and some ones. So that's kind of their first little intro into it. And then they do addition and subtraction within 20. In the meantime, we have a geometry unit that we kind of sprinkle in there. We just finished up a time and calendar unit. And now we are back to those numbers, but within 40. So they kind of slowly build upon one another. And now with these numbers within 40, now instead of one group of 10 and ones, we are really diving into groups of 10s and ones and building that place value knowledge a little deeper. So I just wanted to give you some context of where we're at there. There are 7 main lessons that I teach throughout this unit. They mostly follow along with the Math in Focus program, like of their little main talking points with a couple little switches here and there that I will go over today. And then since we're finishing up this unit, it's actually Wednesday, and then we will assess on Friday. And then we have February vacation. So we're adding a review day in, which I like to do anyway. And then when we come back from vacation, we will be doing addition and subtraction within 40, and that will be students' first introduction to regrouping, a double-digit addition, double-digit subtraction, and all that really fun stuff. So I just wanted to give you a little context there. I will say at previous schools, we never did this like within 10, within 20, within 40, and then, because we're gonna do this again later in the year with numbers within 120, where they will see, the hundreds, tens, and ones, and then we will also do addition and subtraction with those higher numbers too. So I've never done that before. Typically in first grade at the very beginning of the year, we'll definitely do a 1 through 10 review, but very quickly right after that, we go right up to 20. And I'm teaching students those teen numbers right away. Then we might teach some other things, and then we go right into numbers to 120. So usually when I have taught place value in the past, I have always taught it similar to how I'm doing now, but those numbers are bigger right from the get. I can't necessarily say if one way is better than another. I will say that finding materials for my students to practice these skills that with numbers that only go to 40 has been a little challenging. So it seems to me that many curriculums don't do it this way, which is totally fine. I also don't mind pushing my students a little further. So if they have a worksheet or an activity where the numbers are in their 50s and 60s, as long as we're not adding and subtracting it and we're just doing that place value, I have no problem with that. So all that being said, let me share the 7 main lessons that I teach when teaching students place value. All right, when kicking off this unit, I am always talking about grouping items into 10s and ones, and we talk about how it makes it easier to count. So lesson number 1 is grouping items into 10s and ones, and then showing them how to count on that way, how we start counting with our 10s, and then we add on the ones. And again, all of this is going to be within 40. Lesson number 2 is really to identify that place value, that explicit teaching of here's the tens place, here's the ones place. If I look at a 2-digit number, I should be able to identify how many tens there are and how many ones there are. So lesson 2, identify the place value. Lesson 3 is where we are going to use our place value knowledge to compare sets of items, again within 40 for this, but so we are going to count up different sets of items, group them into tens and ones, figure out their place value, and then we're going to say which is greater and which is less than. And just to clarify, we do this 2 days in a row, and the first day for lesson 3, we're just comparing the sets using the words greater than or less than, and then lesson 4 right underneath it is to compare the sets using our place value symbols. So students have had an opportunity to practice this with the numbers within 20, where we use our greater than and less than symbols. So we're going to practice that again. We're kind of spiraling that in. Lesson number 5 is to add or subtract 10 within any number. So here I'm really just trying to show students the 2-digit numbers, and then with a tens rod or with a stack of 10, I'm just like, oh, if we're adding 10, boom, I'm just adding it right here. We're taking away 10, boom, it looks like this. Really showing them that visual, and then also showing them those numbers on a 120 chart or a 100s chart, just so they can see kind of where those numbers are. And I'm gonna go into detail on all of these lessons and exactly how I teach it. But just giving you a little background. Lesson number 6 is going to be to order the numbers from greatest to least or least to greatest. So now instead of just comparing 2 numbers, we're taking that knowledge with 3, 4, 5 numbers. And can we put them in order from least to greatest? Again, using that place value knowledge. And lesson number 7 is going to be similar to number 6. So I usually wrap it in with my review day, but it's going to be completing number patterns. This is something that Math in Focus does a lot, where we want them to really see these number patterns and be able to complete missing numbers that are missing from them. And again, I'll go into that, what that looks like. So here are the 7 main lessons that we end up teaching. So it's really like a week and a half, and then you add in a review day and an assessment day, and you can really kind of beef it up to about 2 full weeks of lessons. Feel free to take a screenshot of this, and now let's dive into the actual lessons themselves.
All right, so to kick off our place value lessons, I told you our first big lesson is to group items to count quickly. Now, I did share this lesson in a previous video, but I'll walk through it quickly. We always start with a warm-up. What's the number? What's the number? And I'm looking again for them to notice that we have a quick 10 and some ones, 2 10s and some ones. And then for this lesson, this day, since we were just kicking off our numbers 1 through 40, I did do a quick warm up where I just put like 3 minutes on the timer, and I wanted everybody to write as many numbers as they could from 1 through 40. And then I had all these cubes. I have a slide here, but I also put these cubes on the rug. So I just have students come make a circle on the rug here. And I said, how can we figure out how many cubes there are? So some students were like, oh, you can count them one by one. And you can kind of move the cubes over. Or on the slide, we could cross out each one so we don't lose track. Others were like, we can count by 2s, we can count by 5s. One friend said, oh, we can count by 10s, which is exactly where we wanted them to go. So then I put them in groups of 10, and with our leftovers is what we call them, or our ones. You know, I said leftovers, but I also made sure that they knew these are our ones. And then I showed them when we do this, we can count really quickly. We can say 10, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. We start with our 10s and then we count by ones. Then I just had 5 minutes on a timer, and I just took some brown paper bags, and I had just red and yellow counters in a bag, and students just had to take turns, and they had one little bag, and they had to dump out the bag and decide how many there were. So them with a partner, they got together and they talked about, how they can go ahead and count these items, what other ways they can do it. So some grouped by 10, and then if they did that, they went ahead and found another way. They counted by 1s, 2s, however they decided to do it. And then they talked about kind of which way worked best and why. And then this slide here is directly from our Math in Focus book. So we just talked over it. You can count by 1s, you can make 10s and 1s, and then just talking about how when you count by 10s and 1s, you count the 10s first and then count on. And then we practiced one of my favorite games for place value called Scoop and Group. So again, I gave them a bag of items. I used mostly red and yellow counters. You can use buttons, anything small. And I put about 50 in each one. And students had to take a big handful of whatever it is, and then they put them into the groups, and they have leftovers. And then there's a recording sheet that went along with this that I shared in another video. If I have a picture of it, I will insert it here. So students did this for about 10 minutes, where they would scoop the items, group them, and then write down how many they actually have. After that, I had made this quick little worksheet that's a freebie, I'll link it down below, where students are grouping the items by 10. So they would actually put a circle around each 10. They'd have to write how many 10s, how many 1s, and then the total number for each of these. And then I have my students, when they finish that, they go over to IXL and do a starred skill.
So that is lesson number 1 in its entirety. Before I dive into the rest of the lessons, I do just want to take a quick second to talk about IXL. As you saw at the end of that last slide, IXL is one of my favorite ways to have students practice games independently, and I am so lucky to be partnering with them in today's video. IXL is an online learning program for kids in grades K through 12, which has tons of skills-based review activities, games, and lessons for teachers and parents to easily assign to their students.
One of my favorite features about IXL is when you go to learning, they have these specific skills plans that align directly to your curriculum. So if you go to textbooks and scroll down, you can see all the curriculums that IXL went ahead and aligned right with the curriculums. So we go to Math and Focus, that's what we use, click on first grade. We are finishing up Unit 6, our place value unit, and you can see that these are the skills my students already practiced, and they even went as far to align them with the specific lessons that are within each chapter. This one right here, number 3, is what we're going to practice next. Put these numbers in order from least to greatest. All I do is click this little star, and it is assigned for my students.
If you want to try out IXL with your own students or your kids at home, they're actually offering a 30-day free trial for teachers and an exclusive 25% off for parents. Whether you are a teacher or a parent, you can take advantage of all of IXL's core subjects like math, science, language arts, all by checking out the link in my description. All right, intro lesson is done. We are grouping objects into 10s and 1s, and we can see how that helps us count faster. Now we are going to identify the place value. We're really specifically going to talk about that 10s place and that 1s place, and we're going to look at those 2-digit numbers and identify both of those. So let me show you that.
Here we have our objective. We can identify place value of numbers within 40. These are some of my warm-ups that I love for place value. So here we have a bunch of different numbers, a bunch of sets of objects, and students have to compare these using the words fewer and greater. So we have to really talk about what each number is, and then they use these words down here to determine or to compare different ones. And then of course I did it, but without, this is like our challenge one, without the block. So what is 2 10s and 3 1s? 23, 25, 15. So we're always warming up our brains with these. After our warm up, I had students sit in a circle on the rug, and I had our place value chart, a 10s and 1s chart over on the rug with a bunch of different cubes. So it says show 2 10s and 3 1s and 3 10s and 2 1s on a place value chart. So we would show what that looked like. And then we said, are they the same or are they different? And why do you think so? So this obviously is really important because we have the same 2 numbers. We have 2 3, 3 2. And so this is where we're really emphasizing that where the number is vastly important when we're determining what the number actually means. We talk about the place value. So 23 and 32. Then this is from our Math and Focus book. So it says we will use place value to show these different numbers, and they just show some different ways. So here we don't have our base 10 cubes. We have like groups of items like we did with Scoop and Group yesterday. Here we have 10s rods and base 10s unit cubes, and we just kind of talk through each one. Then all I did is I gave students their own 10s and 1s chart, their place value chart, and I just started shouting out some 2-digit numbers. So I said, show me the number 15. And they had to, with this time I used base 10 blocks, so I had them put the rod here and then 5 1s. And this I did with them all just sitting on the rug right here. They all kind of spread out with their chart in front of them, and I just shouted out the numbers so I could quickly just assess how students were doing. And then I'd say, okay, change it to 23. Looking for 2 10s, 3 1s. Change it to 27. Did we have to touch the 10s place? Just all these little tips and tricks as we are going, and it lets me quickly see how students are able to do this. After that, we played Let's Practice Spin and Color. So this we did with a partner, and during that initial kind of warm-up, this one where I could see how students were doing, this let me see which students I should take to my back table for this game. So here, all students do is spin the first spinner, 20, and then they spin, so they spin the 10s, they spin the 1s, and then they have to find that number down here. So with my group at the back, over at the back table, everybody kind of spreads out. In my group back there, I of course had our base 10 blocks out. So if we spun 40, I had them build 40 real quick. 43, Okay, let's find that number. They could see what it looks like, just emphasizing the tens and ones and what that really looks like. So we play that for 10 minutes. And then students went off and they did this quick counting blocks where they had to count the tens and ones and actually write the number in before again heading to IXL.
All right, so that is lesson number 2. So lesson 1, we are grouping items into tens and ones. Lesson 2, we're really talking about that place value for each number, why it's important, and I'm really looking to see if students can actually build those with some concrete materials, right? And then anybody that is ready to kind of move on, they can move on and practice that game without the concrete materials. Students that are still working on it, we are still using them. For lesson number 3, we're going to take that knowledge of our place value and we are going to start comparing numbers. So let me show you that lesson.
Our objective, we can use place value to compare numbers within 40. Here we have another warm-up using fewer and greater. And then I love this warm-up. I have a bunch of these over in my math talks. I have all these math talks. I'll of course link them down below and they're all in the math club. But for this one, students have to pick a number over here. And then in the grid, they can choose to add 10 to it or subtract 10 from it and find the answer in the grid. So we kind of work, I call students up one by one. They are looking at which number. So maybe they want to do 34. Okay, how can I get there? I can take 24 and I have to add 10, and then we color it in. And then they just keep doing that over and over until all of the numbers are colored in. For this engage portion, this is always when students are in a circle and I'm usually doing something with some concrete materials. So here we took 8 of one color and 16 of another color, and we regrouped them into tens and ones. So right away we noticed with our 8 that we cannot make a group of 10. And then with 16, we were like, oh, we can make a group of 10 and we have 6 ones. And then we compared them. And as we did that, I showed students how we first compare by looking at the tens place, then we look at the ones place. And right away we could see that, there was a 10 here and no 10 here. So this number is automatically larger. And then part B was just moving some from this one to this one until they show the same number. And we talked about how many cubes we had to move and how many were in each group then. Then we went over this little slide from Math in Focus. We compared the sets of numbers and we just talked through all of this. And then students went ahead and they started comparing. So I mentioned this earlier, but for day 1 of comparing, we're not looking to use the symbol. We are instead just figuring out which one is greater. So again, we have tens, we have ones. Player 1 would do all the number ones. Player 2 would do number 2. We would use our base 10 blocks as needed. And then each time they would just circle the bigger number and fill in the sentence so it made sense. So 12 is greater than 11 or whatever their numbers are. Then for independent practice, they had a sheet that looks like this and they just had to compare both numbers in the circles and color in the one that is larger. Then as always, at the end, they went to IXL if there was still time.
So that is lesson 3 about comparing sets of items and using that place value knowledge to really figure out which number is greater and which number is less than. So I do think I should mention, I don't think I've said this yet in this video, but my math block is about 60 minutes long. So when my students come in from snack and recess, we come right to the rug and we always start with some skip counting videos and then we do our digital calendar and then dive right into the lesson. So you are really seeing every single slide after calendar that we kind of walk through the way that the lesson is always going to work, right? We start with a warm-up. I start with our objective and some explicit teaching. Maybe I'm engaging them over in the circle. We're talking about it, talking through exactly what we're going to do that day. Then they always go off and do some partner practice. And during that partner practice is when I am pulling a group to help them along. And then they go into independent practice. And of course, during independent practice, I'm usually working with those same students. Sometimes if during that partner practice, I've really helped a student or two along and they can go off and do that independent practice on their own. And then during partner practice, I'm like, over there seems to be a little problem. So I can pull them back and do independent practice with me. It really gives me some time to kind of check in. And then it really, for the IXL skills, they're kind of doing that the last 5, sometimes 10 minutes, but really 5 minutes of the period. And then we go to lunch. So then once we've compared sets of numbers using words like greater than and less than, then we go into comparing those same numbers, but with the symbols. So let's look at that lesson.
All right, so we have the same objective as the previous day where we are comparing numbers within 40. And again, we have our warm-ups here with using tens and ones and using the words fewer and greater to compare. And then we also have this warm up, which I told you is one of my favorites, where we're adding and subtracting 10. And then actually we watched this Brain Pop Junior video. It is a great video that just kind of reiterates what we've been talking about comparing numbers. So I kind of kicked off with that little video. And then this is from Math in Focus, where we are comparing 28 and 31 by starting at the tens place and then moving to the ones if we need to. And then there we have that symbol. We have greater than means greater than. So here we can use place value to order and compare our numbers. So using what we just kind of talked about, let's look at our tens place first. We can see here that even though the ones place is the same, this one has 4 tens and this only has 3. So we talk about how to draw the symbol. Now, when we do draw the symbol, we don't use the alligator method. We do the 2 dots method, where we will draw 2 dots here towards the bigger number, and then only 1 dot on the smaller number, and then connect them. I will tell them afterwards, like, oh, look, it looks like it's eating the bigger number, but we don't really stick with the alligator method is what I would call it. Instead, we do the dot method. And just because this is on my laptop and I'm not gonna draw on my laptop, just to show it in case you never saw this, this is how we would do it. Say, okay, 43 is bigger, so I'm going to draw 2 dots on this side and only 1 dot on this side, and then we connect them like that. And then chomp, 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 it is eating the bigger number. Then we just go ahead and practice this up on the board, where I will show a couple different sets of numbers one at a time. First, we start with our place value blocks, and then I move into, again, that 3 tens and 9 ones. We identify what each number is and which way the symbol should be going. Then we played Best of 10. Let me show you this game. Best of 10 is just a simple dice comparing game for 2-digit numbers. This is a set of 4 of these, so I had cut these in fourths and everybody only got 1. And then you just need 2 dice. I gave my students a green and a red dice, and I made it specific that green means go. It'll be our first number that goes in our tens. Red means stop. It'll be our last number that goes in the ones. So all students will do, just like we've seen this game many times before with dice, they roll it. 5 tens, so 55. 55. Player 1 gets 55. They write it here, 55. Player 2 then goes 63. Player 2 gets 63. I had them both circle the bigger number, and then they drew the symbol here in the middle. So they just did this 10 times, and I had them circle it because at the end, they had to see who had best of 10. So who had the most. There are 10 rounds that they get to do. And then if it was a tie, they could just do rock, paper, scissors, and whoever wins always takes the game home. Because this is a faster game, we played for about 8 minutes, and then we moved right along to our independent practice, which I hope you can see the pattern now of kind of how each lesson really goes. So then students got this worksheet right here where they had to compare each of the numbers using the symbols, and then as always, they went to IXL to practice some skills even further.
All right, my hair was getting in my way, so I had to put that up. All of the games I have shared so far, the ones where they are doing their partner practice and the games that they're playing against one another, they're actually in my hands-on place value unit. It looks like this right here. And before I show you these last 2 lessons, I'm gonna let you know that all of these slides right here, I have packaged into one big freebie. Now, quick disclaimer, some of the slides obviously use Math in Focus. They use their trademarked copyrighted items. So those I just kind of shifted to my own. It's the same type of content, but I didn't take images from the text like I do for my own class, because I want them to see the actual Math in Focus language and images, because that's what they see in their workbooks. As I walk through the lessons each week, I obviously plan using my slides. So as I follow the slides, it helps me plan out exactly what each day is going to look like, because it already has the components of a lesson. So we always start with our math talks, and I've already made a bunch, so I pull math talks that I want my class to work on. And then we go to the explicit teaching, where I will either make a slide or I pull from the Math in Focus book or slide, so students can really see that in connection to what they are learning. Then we usually play some sort of game. Usually it's a game I've created. Sometimes I might find another game that somebody else has created. Sometimes a teammate has created a game that works great. And then for independent practice, again, I'm kind of looking at some of the stuff I have, some of the stuff that my teammates have, and we just kind of pull from a bunch of different sources. So as I've compiled these slides for you, I'm obviously not going to take somebody else's work and redistribute it. So as I went ahead and made this big freebie for you, I obviously didn't use somebody else's work in mine. So I just made something similar that follows the same skills. So you'll be able to teach all of these lessons on your own. I will have that linked down in the description below. It'll have all the slides and everything you need to get started. I will say, as you go through them, you definitely want to add some slides in that might make sense for your own students. Your students' math warm-ups might not be the the exact same ones that my students need. Or you might want to pull, instead of my explicit teaching slides, you might want to pull from your own curriculum and add them in there. So it always is a little different, and you might even have an activity or a worksheet that you think is better for what your kids are exactly practicing than the one that I'm offering. So as you go through the slides, always just, be aware of what your own kids need and feel free to plug in whatever your own students need. All right, now let's go to adding and subtracting 10.
All right, here we have our objective slide. We can use place value to add and subtract 10 from 2-digit numbers. Again, a little warm up. What's the number here? We've got 33 and we've got 25, and we have our plus 10 minus 10 warm up. Now, another reason I love using this warm up throughout this time is now we are getting into that explicit teaching, and the students already have a lot of background knowledge surrounding this. Many students have already made the connections about how they can easily add and subtract 10. So here I have a representation of the number 33. I often will also have students come to the rug in a circle, and I will show them this right here. And all I'm doing with this right here is showing them how easy it is to add and subtract a 10 from any number. All right, so I went to the back table and I grabbed just some place value blocks because this is exactly what I do on the rug. We say, okay, this number is 33. If I want to add 10 more, how can I do it? Now, some of my students will say, oh, I can, count on by 10. I'll even ask students, oh, could I take 10 of these and I add them here? They're like, yeah, you could. And then some students are like, oh, what about this? I can just go, boom. Now what do I have? Do I have to count and say, oh, we had 33, 34, 35, 36? No, we just say, boom. Now this 30 is 40, so it's 43. I didn't even touch the ones place. If I'm doing 33 minus 10, I can just, boom, take it away. Now 30 has changed to 20 and we have 23. And then I do this with quite a few numbers. So let's say I have 45. I say 45 minus 10. What do? Boom, pull it away. So this really helps students see that place value. And then I'm also going ahead and I'm writing this on the board too. So I'm like 33, or let's say we're doing 35 now. 35 plus 10, boom, I'm just changing the 3 to a 4. Nothing happens to the ones. I reiterate that. So after that explicit teaching, this is really a time where I also like to show them part of a hundreds chart. We haven't done too much work with the 100 chart yet because, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we kind of work within numbers through 10, then to 20, then to 40 before we dive up to 100. But I like to introduce this here, and this is our first time getting to actually see some patterns on this chart. So we talk about how there's, the ones place, all the 6s are the same here. All the 9s, all the 0s. The only thing that's changing as you go up or down is the 10s place. We also talk about how in this hundreds chart, we start with a 1 here. Our numbers get bigger as you go down and smaller as you go up. So then I just show them, okay, if I have 26, how could I subtract 10? And so we know on a number line, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16. And what I do is I circle both numbers. I say, what do we notice about that? And I say, okay, what if we have 16 and we subtract 10 again? 1, 2, and I keep counting back and I say, wait a second, what do we notice about that? And we notice that all you really have to do is go up 1 to subtract 10 because our tens place gets smaller by 1. Or if we're adding, we go down 1. So again, this explicit teaching on this type of chart too. Then we do this all together where I will show a number. We all say 22. Somebody tells me what's 22 plus 10 and then minus 10. Plus 10, minus 10. And then here we take away those cubes and we just look at the 2-digit numbers. Plus 10, minus 10, plus 10, minus 10. And for our game, this is a game I love. It's called 10 More, 10 Less Cover Up. Again, it's from my place value pack. And all students do is they will spin a spinner over here and they will in the grid have to, just like our warm up, again, another reason I love the warm up, is because they can either find a number that's 10 more or 10 less in the grid to color in. So they are in charge of doing that. They are not coloring in the number that they match. Instead, they're finding 10 more or 10 less. And students go back and forth and try to fill up as many as they can. And then for their practice page, this is again from my place value pack, I tell them that make sure you are looking at the symbols. Sometimes we're adding, sometimes we are subtracting. and then you know it, they go to IXL.
So there's our whole lesson for adding and subtracting 10. I love that lesson. This is one that I don't think is technically in our Math in Focus book for this unit, but I know that it comes later and it's also one of the first grade standards. So I like to introduce it, and it's such an easy one to show students with visuals, both concrete ones and pictures on the board, how we can just add a 10 by drawing a rectangle or crossing out one of the 10s, and then we can just see that place value in the 10s place change. So now we are on to our last lesson. This is one, ordering numbers, I love, but then Math in Focus has this other additional part to it where they're completing number patterns that I think is just unnecessarily tricky. And I'll show you the way they kind of do it. So when the free slides that I'm giving you, I don't necessarily do it the exact same way. Again, I obviously do for my own students because I want them to be very aware and familiar with the curriculum that we are using. But I do find that their number patterns can be a little tricky, but I'll show you.
All right, so last but not least, we can use place value to order numbers within 20. I usually have 2 math warm-ups, but this day was pretty quick, so I took out one of them. And then I said we can use place value to order the numbers, and I just kind of walked through each step. I said, step 1, we look at the tens place. Now, I talked about already with my students when I introduced this slide, how we have been comparing 2 numbers at a time and saying which one's greater than, which one's less than. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to be using more than 2 numbers. We might use 3, 4, or 5. So I say first we look at the tens place, and I come up on the board and I underline each of those tens places. Then I say, well, wait a second, if we're looking for the biggest number here, I have 2 that are in the 30s. So next, step 2, we have to look at the ones place. Then we say 35 or 30, which one's bigger, 5 or 0? 5 is, so 5 is greater than 30. Then we order either from least to greatest or greatest to least. This is where I'm telling students to really pay attention to the directions. Students can get mixed up on this. Least to greatest or smallest to biggest. We have 22, 30, 35, and then greatest to least, we have 35, 30, and 22. And we talk about how that number 30 kind of stays in the middle for both of these and why that is with 3 numbers. Now, this is the Math in Focus portion of the lesson where we are finding missing numbers in a number pattern. And like I said, I think it is a little confusing, but I understand the point of it. We really want our students to be familiar with these numbers and have a solid number sense. So when I'm teaching my students to complete number patterns, I always explain to them that the first thing they need to do is see, does their number pattern go up or down? Are they counting to get higher or are they counting to get smaller? Because some of these number, like this one, if you're starting here and go backwards, obviously you're getting smaller, but sometimes the number pattern will start with 40 here and it will go down, like they're clearly counting down. So that's what we do first. Then we identify, we can count up by 1s, 2s, or 5s. Now I am aware that there's many other ways we can make number patterns, but these are the most common ways that we do it in first grade. So that is what we're looking for. So here's just some examples, 19, 21, 23, 25. We would have talked about how these numbers are getting bigger, but not by 1s. 5s is too many. It's counting up by 2s. So we fill in the missing blank. Same here. This is also getting bigger by 2, or if we're counting down, it's getting smaller by 2. We can fill in the number patterns from both ways. Then we went ahead and we just practiced this together. So again, looking at the number pattern, we can see it's going up and it is by 1s. Here, going up by 2s. Here, going up by 2s. And we do always talk about how even though we are, counting by 2s, we're not starting at 0, so they're not always going to be even numbers. Then we just did a quick write the room. This was from Tara West's packet. I forget where exactly this was from, but she had some fill in the missing patterns. Hers were actually trickier and different from what we were doing. So I had went ahead and edited it for my own classroom. I do have a different one that will work just great for 1s, 2s, and 5s. So they just had 12 different cards that looked like this, and they had to, again, fill in the missing number. It proved to be pretty tricky for about 4 or 5 of my students, so I really had to walk them through that. And then afterwards, this was just a sheet that one of my teammates had made a while ago. You just go ahead and look at each number. At the top, we're ordering the numbers from greatest to least, and at the bottom from least to greatest.
And there you have it. That is the last lesson in our place value unit, where we are really talking about those 10s and 1s. And again, we kind of stick within 40, and then we will develop later into those numbers, those 3-digit numbers, into 100 and 120. I know this was a bit of a thorough video, and I gave you a lot of detail and talked a lot about the slides, but I thought it would be helpful to really see exactly how I teach a full unit. And since this place value unit is only about 7 lessons long, I thought this would be a good one to share with you. If you like these kind of deep dives into a topic, not just me sharing just a couple games and activities here and there, but like actually sharing exactly how I teach it, please let me know down in the comments, or if there's other skills you want to see this for, I can definitely do this type of video again. So while this unit is about 7 days long, there were 7 full days of lessons. We, throughout this 2-week period, had Global Play Day, we had Valentine's Day, we had the 100th day. So ours took us like 2 full weeks. And tomorrow I will actually be assessing students. So I will be putting our review day tied together with our assessment. So sometimes I have a full review day where, depending on what my students need, I might have students come back and play some of these games that we've been playing throughout the time. They'll play those again. They might do some IXL skills. There might be something more specific that I have them do. But that is usually what happens on review day, and we just do quick rotations. But tomorrow instead, we'll kind of do like a whole group review. I might have them go practice a game for about 10 minutes, and then we will do our quick assessment. And our assessments are a mix of our math and focus work, and then also just some more like specific questions, or not necessarily more specific, but our curriculum is pretty wordy, and sometimes it doesn't just like get right to the point. For example, if I want to know if a student can add or subtract 10 from any number, I want to see 24 plus 10. What's the answer? The curriculum that we use might give like a really long, wordy word problem to see if students can do that. And so I like that as an extension, or as a like general, can my students really understand a math problem? But I also want to know if they can directly do that math. So I think it's just missing out on some of those like direct questions. So we like to do a mix. All right, and that is the end of this place value video. Like I said, I took all of these slides and I put them for you free down below. I don't have every single game in there because they're from my place value pack that looks like this right here, my hands-on place value pack, but I do have a bunch of them for free in the freebie. Feel free to edit those slides and make them how you need them for your own students. But I really hope that kind of guides you along. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. As always, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new video. See you in the next one. Bye.